Okay, I just started to record. First order of business is who's going to take the minutes this time?
Well, I think that Jane did it last time, so I'll see if we can do it this time.
Okay,
Thanks,
Thank
Lynn.
yep, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I'll come out from under my desk now.
Well, they're
Okay.
co-secretaries. They have to wrestle.
I think
Oh,
you
so
missed
the
that
thoughts I
part,
was
David.
having, this is terribly sexist, but I do not want to raise my hand.
Neither
I
did
think-
we, but nobody else did.
Okay, and
I
I
think that
don't
makes a
think we
lot of
have any,
sense sharing it like that.
I don't think we have, let's see, I am recording the meeting. Anybody else recording the meeting, just for the record?
Oh,
Okay,
Rely on your
hearing and
recording.
seeing none. I don't believe we have any minutes to approve because I think we did our minutes of our last meeting at the big meeting. So we can move right along. Review of consultants report and next steps for our committee, which is pretty much per Alan's letter.
Yeah, do you want to do
So-
a roll call for public, Mike, do you want to do a roll call for public purposes so they know who's
Oh,
on?
maybe we should for public purposes. Okay. Everybody state your name. I'll start.
Jane
Mike Naughton.
Dutcher,
Lynn Reynolds,
David Young.
Jane Dutcher.
Alan Genovese. And Alan
Okay, very good.
Genovese.
That's right. I guess we should be doing roll calls because this is remote.
And Mike.
Well,
And
now
I-
that you're
right, Mike
recording it,
Naughton. Okay. Well, I'm going to kind of throw this out for discussion. I did send a document around as my attempt to kind of go over, match our committee's purpose with what we got from the consultants. That's certainly not the only way to look at it. And so I'd like to offer anybody else an opportunity to either react to that or offer other points of view, or how do you think we should go about this? Any ideas?
well, we talked about things where people had a number of questions, and I thought we had kind of a list of things we wanted to ask of the consultants.
Right.
So I apologize that I don't have further input.
Alan, you want to say something?
Yeah, so we did do that. We shared that list. We had our full planning board meeting. The consultants actually took all our questions pretty seriously, took them under advisement, and they went back and they, what do I want to say? They tweaked their report and answering our questions, and that's included in their final document. So they then, went kind of beyond because they thought they were done. They went beyond that and they went back into their report and they finished it by addressing the concerns and questions. So you should find most of those or all of them in the final report. So we weren't going to have another meeting after we went over our questions and they had a chance to, they either responded to them at that point or they said, we'll go back and look at that aspect in the report and we'll make adjustments accordingly. I know one of the big ones was, their limited target sample for making statements like, this is not well received or however they put it. So I think they resolved that when I looked, is they just took it out. They felt that, you know, maybe instead of having a big, long thing about who they asked and who said that, they just removed it. And said it's really not pertinent. It was almost like when they were interviewing, it was an afterthought that they asked. And I think they probably wish they hadn't asked that, but so they removed that.
Okay, did everyone find the final report?
I don't think I did. I'm just looking at my email and realizing that I didn't realize that was an update. Oh.
Okay, I discovered it on the website that Greg set up. Because I saw, Alan, in your letter that you'd mentioned there was an update, and I hadn't remembered seeing that come through.
I thought Greg was putting it on the website and sending it out because that was at least the plan, so that people could review it and as the final document, and then you know, react to it and see how you want to organize your work going forward in digesting it and sharing your reactions to it, and then ultimately then taking those reactions or developing like a talking point balanced document that you would be sharing with various constituents, and then kind of reporting back to the full committee on how you're doing and trying to get people's feedback for you know, from the final report and into whatever reactions you want to share with the various audiences, if that makes sense.
Okay, so sounds like to get the final report, we have to go to the website, because I don't think it came, I don't think I got how do you say, an attachment from Greg.
Okay.
Right, I didn't see one either. So he did send out a link to the website.
Okay.
I did look through it. It didn't look as if there were a whole lot of changes. But one thing I noticed, I don't know if this was true for you, Alan, the formatting got kind of screwed up, the paging. So
That
I
might
actually
be
found,
with Greg, yeah.
it was a
I
PDF
think,
and it went from 90
Yeah.
some odd pages to 114 pages. And that seemed to be because a lot of white space got added somehow. So I actually found it not that easy to go through.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I had gotten the I thought that it went out to everybody. I had gotten, you know, it's sent to me from the consultants and sent to Greg, and then Greg was putting it up to everyone. And I did think I thought it was going out. But he's been working really hard on the website, so he may not realize that there were technical problems as he's shifted from, you know, a document and whatever he has to do to move it over to the website.
Huh.
Technology is great when it
So the
works.
document
So
you got,
I'll talk to him about that.
the document you have doesn't have those issues or that issue.
No.
How big a deal would it be to forward it?
What I'm
Well,
gonna do
maybe-
is ask him to send it directly to you. And then you shouldn't have those format issues, and then I'll bring it to his attention that have him open it up and see what those issues are. Maybe he'll have to go through it and sort of delete things so it pulls it together. Did the font
Okay.
change at all or anything? Alignment or font
Yeah,
or anything like that?
the font changed.
Ah,
And like I say, it ballooned in the number of pages. So at first I
yeah,
thought,
that
oh,
alone could explain it.
Yeah.
they've added a bunch of
Yeah.
stuff, I thought, but then it turned out that they hadn't really added a bunch of stuff. It was just a lot of white space here and there.
Mm.
Well, that would be good.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be good if
Okay.
he said, if you just ask him to send it around to everybody.
will.
I'm guessing that you may have been the only person who got it. So,
I think I may have gotten it from the consultants in Greg. I think they sent it to him and sent it to me. I don't remember. It was a while ago. But
Okay, that
he and
sounds
I
right.
talked and so I'm gonna put it up. So I'll have a quick conversation with him. I guess you could focus on how whatever you come up with as you're figuring out your different responses to it, how you're thinking you would organize that in such a way that you would then share your reactions to it and what your thoughts are and how you'd get it out to the different stakeholders.
Okay, well, I think we still might be able to talk somewhat today, because as I say, my impression was there wasn't a lot of new information
Mhm.
in the report. It was pretty much clarification, clearing up some wording.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they did that during our meeting. You know, when we had that meeting with them, they answered the questions and then they went back after and made those, those minor adjustments. So
Right.
I think you're good to go.
Oh, Mike, we were discussing having a meeting about the transportation with the two representatives from the two districts.
Yes.
Where is that? We don't have a date yet, or
Well, no, let's ask Alan when here he is. Alan,
I think,
Jane,
yeah.
Jane mentioned the transportation. You had said that something about inviting Joanne to come to a full meeting to talk about the transportation report. I mean, I guess what we should do is clarify. This committee would like to talk to Joanne about the transportation report. We can either do that as a subcommittee, or we can do that as part of the full committee. It doesn't make sense to me anyway that we do both. I'm not sure there's a need for that. So what are your thoughts? What's the best way to go there? Because
I think it
I
would
haven't
make a
done
lot of
anything. Pardon?
Yeah, I think it should really be this subcommittee. And hopefully we'll have another member, who volunteers to be on it, but it would make sense because that's subcommittee work to have the subcommittee meet with both directors. That doesn't have to occur, right away. You might want to get all organized about the report and that in one thing, and then maybe in January, because it's not going anywhere, have a meeting with both of them in this subcommittee. We could, if you think of it, Mike, at our full meeting on January 17th, you could share that the subcommittee is planning on meeting with them, and if people have any specific questions. Now, refresh my memory. I don't think we didn't really get, Joanne was waiting for some a response to different questions she had, right, before she was ready to have a meeting or have a conversation. So I guess that'd be the place, Mike, for you to reach out to her, find out if she's prepared in terms of, did she get all the answers she was looking for, what's a good date for her, and let her know how you're going to proceed in terms of you'd like to set up a meeting with her and Tanya and the subcommittee, and go over, have her present it and go over it, and you can collectively ask questions.
Okay,
Does
that
that
sounds
make
good.
I think
Yeah,
it's
that makes-
most important to meet with her to help us understand the report better.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
because she's familiar with that report and its format. And I'm not sure that whether we're interpreting it well.
Okay,
Right,
I-
that's my
okay.
feeling. So, and
I don't
I'm
think we
happy
need
to,
Tanya, is my point. I want to understand the report better first before I start discussing the actual data that's in it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just wondering if it might be good to at least invite her for the reason that she may not understand it either. And
Well, that's-
so having Joanne go over everything, it sort of puts everyone on the same page that you're all hearing the same information. And it puts her in a better position to understand it better and then respond to it at some point. So, you know,
if we can
a
focus the meeting
presentation to
maybe
everybody
on,
would be.
Joanne's explanation and us understanding
Right.
what we're being told, and then we can move on. Okay.
Does that sound all right, Jane, or what do you?
Yes, I find that sometimes when I'm in a meeting with some people, they dominate the meeting and I lose the reason that I'm there because it gets, you're laughing and shaking your head. You know exactly what I'm saying.
I know what I know what you're saying. Thank you.
I know
So,
what you're saying too, Jane. So how about how about if I volunteer to try to help keep that from happening?
That would be great. Push the mute
Yep.
button.
So Jane,
I'm
wanna,
sorry,
uh,
but I've asked her questions over the years and gotten lectures and no answers to my questions.
so my
Right, and
question,
I
Jane, is
think-
how bad did I look the last time she started talking over me and I went nuts? Because that's what it takes. I
Yeah,
went absolutely nuts.
Well, in Zoom, there is the mute button, and the purpose of this meeting will be for Tanya to learn some things if she's so inclined. But I agree that I don't see that she has a lot to offer us at this point if our goal is to understand the report that Joanne has commissioned. I
Okay.
think it's Joanne is the one who's going to be helpful there.
right.
So, but I also think it'd be at least politically expedient to invite her along if she does want to learn about the report, and
Yeah, I agree
Yeah,
with that.
and
just try to make sure things don't get
yeah,
off
I do.
track.
Yeah, and you can really set the tone, you know, when you start the meeting in terms of this is the expectation. We're going to let her, you know, present all the information. Please, all members refrain from, you know, interrupting and we'd like to hear the full presentation. And then you can go round robin to ask different people if they have questions. So she'll have her turn. But
Right.
that might help, Jane, in that, you know, if Mike says, okay, I'm going to call on each one, and you'll be able to ask your questions or make your comments. So we're putting all that pressure on you, Mike.
Well, okay, I'll do my best.
I know it will.
Okay, well, that is one major area of focus for us, is the transportation. Shall we look at the document I prepared and just kind of see if we think it's a useful way to look at things?
Yes,
Okay. I pretty much went down, I pulled our subcommittee purpose, which I included in the agenda. I pretty much went through each of those items and broke them out and put down my reactions to how the consultant's report covered them. And starting with Chapter 70 funding, my sense was that projections about Chapter 70 funding for a combined district were pretty well covered in Appendix 11.
Okay, so we're looking at the Excel spreadsheet you sent.
Yes,
Okay,
that had projections going out for what a combined district get would for Chapter 70 funding, and I felt that probably covered. My own feeling is I'm not sure we're going to do a whole lot better than that.
I think that's one of the areas where we have the least ability to predict the future.
Yes. The only thing we might do, it occurs to me, is if we had wanted to make other assumptions about enrollment, that would affect, changing the enrollment assumptions would change Chapter 70. But the only way that could happen would be if we had the underlying spreadsheets that DESI used to make all those predictions. We don't have those. They haven't offered them to us. And I mean, so I'm not sure that it's worth trying to pursue that. And if we don't pursue that, if we just sort of accept what they've presented to us, then we have that, and it's pretty clear to me that what that is telling us. Alan? Oh, you're mute.
oh, I'm just trying to print it, but it's kind of chopped up, so it's not gonna make any sense.
Yeah, it did make sense to me only because I tried to print it too, and it came out on three separate pages. I couldn't get it to come out as nicely as he had it in one nice little table to look at. So I was trying to line things up to make it make sense. So I don't know.
Sorry about that.
why.
I didn't consider printing, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm getting 6 pages.
Yeah,
I
well, I
just-
got it down to 3.
I just shortened the width of each column until
There's a
I
way-
got it so that it would fit on one page. I had to change some line sizes to allow things to wrap around. It only took me about 5 minutes to make those changes and then print it all on one page.
I wonder
But-
if you could send it to us now.
Well,
Jane, could,
my butt is this, Alan. Having done that, I did not save it.
Oh,
Jane,
Oh.
Jesus saves, you need to save too.
boy,
I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't.
Libby, I don't know if I can do anything from here.
I did leave a message for Greg and let him know that if he could get it out to everybody ASAP and then go to the website and check it out. I think he's teaching right now.
I can't make it do what I need.
Well, I know if I attempt, I'll lose everybody, so I'll wait. See, I'll try
Yeah.
Jane's method. So I talked to Jay and he said a couple things. One, they put out additional grants. He was surprised, but they put out another grant for people who are interested in pursuing, this consolidation thing. So he just wanted to let me know if there was a need for that. Maybe one of the superintendents would put something together, but we'd have to, obviously, if we were going to do that, we'd have to be very clear about what else we're looking for, if anything, to apply for the grant. The other thing is he said that he doesn't see the hold harmless ever going away. So because if they're encouraging other districts across the state to look at regionalization, then they're going to have to keep the hold harmless provision, because he said, you know, obviously no one's going to do it if they're going to be penalized financially. So apparently the legislators, or some of them, understand that that's the reality. So if they want this to happen, they're going to have to come up with more money initially to get this economy of scale by larger districts. So David, this is something to think about. You had put out there, are we big enough? I'm wondering if you think it might be a good use of going after some more money to see if there's some other towns that might want to take a look at this and expand our I don't know if I can say expand our scope, because we were
Well,
given a pretty specific charge.
I wonder if we could get a toe in the water, not necessarily to form a 26 town, 78 member planning board, but to do the next steps. And the first thing that occurs to me, who's the applicant? Because DESI's got their sense of constituency. The underlying enabling law said that a town meeting and a board of selectmen could form this planning committee. I wonder if one of our member towns could be the lead town, and we could have, because we might have some luck with Gil Montague, but we're not going to get much attention, or it'd be a tough pull to get Pioneer invested in, you know, a
Well,
next
and
step.
we must remember that it was the 4 towns of a pioneer district that voted to do this, was not the district.
He's
Each
frozen.
town voted, and we did not, and the vote was to form the, this committee to look at a larger district. It was not to look at a district with Gil Montague, it was to look at a larger district.
I'm just saying,
Oh.
for the next ask of DESI for more planning money, I wonder if this committee could be the applicant, or if one of our overarching towns could be, rather than a school district. This
Right.
is not in the interest of a school district
No,
from their perceptions.
I'll just break in. I just emailed everybody a PDF that should print on 1 page.
oh,
Does it answer this question, Michael?
No. But we can go back to this question.
Oh.
Well, I think we should look into it. I really don't, I'm not interested in the fight that getting Pioneer to be the applicant. And then we
no,
could-
I
We're-
like
that's
your
an
idea that
interesting-
maybe, it does seem like the town should be eligible based on the language of the statute.
Well, are we getting a little ahead of ourselves here? Not to say I disagree with this idea.
No, the practicalities of this weigh heavily on the answer to the question which is that we've been informed that there's additional regionalization planning money available. And I gotta say, yes, we should go for it, but it should be an intermediate
But
step.
does that not imply that we have decided that forming a region out of the 6 towns isn't the best option? Because if we thought it were the best option, why would we need more planning money?
Because it may be the best option for us, but it's not necessarily the best option for financially, or for long-term, or it's too little, too late. So we might like where we're headed, but I still think we need to look at other options.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that it doesn't, oh, I'm sorry, Jane, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that we have to remember that we need to be thinking about 10 years out what things look like. And 10 years from now, I can't see that a 6-town district is gonna be the wise thing. Unless, because of the pandemic, we're gonna have a surge in the pediatric department.
Well,
Um,
and or refugees from the urban areas.
Well,
Yeah. So I mean, you raise a good point, Mike. Are we by inference, sending the wrong signal? I didn't realize, Jane, that the way it was worded, I guess I should have looked up the town meeting vote, what it was, but I didn't realize it was to form a planning committee to look at a larger district. I guess that may have been framed by the way that Mike Sullivan, framed this first grant. But I think that, to David's point, we can continue, the information we're looking for is going to be critical and it's going to help both districts, regardless of what our final recommendation is. We're going to have a wealth of information about what people's concerns are, how they'd like to see the district organized, what they think are important for courses, what they're feeling are affordable in terms of the finances. So we're going to have a wealth of information that can be constructive to both districts. Concurrent to that, since there isn't a limitation, then there's nothing that prevents us from either through a town or I think it's intriguing to say, look, we would like to expand the scope of the work and do a dual investigation in terms of, we'll continue the work we're doing and we're opening that door up for other districts or towns, I should say, because David's right. It's the towns who are going to have much more interest. And to that note, I have a phone call with a gal by the name of Lucy up in the Berkshires that's very interested in our work. And again, that was formed by the towns in the Berkshires. I think they said there were 8 towns, and or Jay did. I haven't had the meeting yet with her, but it wasn't. The school committee is not on board up there either. It's the town initiative of these 8 towns that are looking at this. So I think David's right. That's the way it's going to have to be looked at, and it's unfortunate because if the school committee is really looking at what's in the best interest of kids in the long run, boy, they should be really enthusiastically embracing any kind of exploration that might benefit the kids, down the road. So,
but they can only look at that after they've first placed their jobs first.
yeah.
And, I'm sorry, but they have to admit that they're not all going to survive.
Right. But it can be done, Jane. I mean, look at Pioneer. Pioneer was comprised of 4 separate elementary schools, and those people had their own school committees for those elementary schools. And they saw the benefit of the greater good, and all those school committees in the 4 towns actually voted to put themselves out of business, so to speak, because they put the district first and they formed the K-12 district. And the school committee at the time decided that it was really important to keep them in the role, in the loop. And so for the first year, when that went to an effect, basically they deferred to the school committee and the school council in terms of, what the curriculum needed to be at that time and what the budget would look like. And so it was a nice transition. So if the right people understand that they're just renting that chair and their focus is to do what's best for kids, we had all those people that put their ego aside and voted to not be school committee members. I was fortunate that I happened to be in the Pioneer, so I didn't dissolve. Pioneer School Committee took everything on, but all the other committees dissolved.
Right, and when they did, the principals of the schools were still in place. It's not like there was not the administrative staff in each Pioneer, in each elementary school, that there was a Pioneer. I didn't live here at the time, so I don't know
Yeah, we had a
what the
teaching
administrative
principal, Warwick.
picture looked like. But
We had a
anyway,
teaching principal. We had Kevin Harrington was the superintendent of schools, and the carrot was always a big part of regionalization, though. We were going to get, transportation reimbursement,
transportation.
and we've been on a continuous path seeking efficiencies through shared services, et cetera. So, but the constituency here is clearly the towns, and my short 6-year tenure as a school committee member, I have watched opportunity after opportunity be squandered. And even at the point of inflection when there's a superintendent vacancy, that's the place where at least you're not putting a superintendent out of a job.
Right.
It just, nobody can go there.
Yeah.
So how are we going to?
So I can ask Jay if you would like to, maybe he can give clarification to your, whoever, Jane or Dave, whoever, or Lynn, whoever raised the question of, can our committee apply for this money? He had
What's the
mentioned maybe one
deadline?
of the superintendents.
Well, Alan, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because I don't think this subcommittee is going to apply for anything. Okay.
No, I
So
was talking about the planning board.
I know, but shouldn't we be having this discussion with the rest of the planning board then?
Well, I actually
think we
don't
can-
think it should be this planning board could be advisory to it, but from my perspective as a town official, this thing was put on rails to follow the compass heading that the Hart Committee study advanced as options, and it was, and the same consultants picked it up, and the thing was not an assessment. It was picking up on the logical next steps. And the question is, to me, is that where we're going, or are we at a point to stand back and say we've got to get more broad? And I think that it really needs to be the towns saying that, not our. I mean, we might come to that conclusion, but I think the towns need to be the applicant. I think there's high probability that DESE hadn't conceived of that in any, that school districts, whether of one town or more, are their constituency, and that's who they make it. And there's another, we've just uncovered another flaw in the whole design.
David, do you think you could get the 4 boards of selectmen in the towns to collectively, have a Zoom meeting, discuss this, and then become a collective grant writer with, maybe one representative from each town to do that?
Well, I wouldn't see a reason not to include Gill and Montague Select Board in the mix.
Right, I'm sorry, you're right.
And yes, I think we could do it. I think that as a 6th town, we should have some kind of a recommendation, though. I very infrequently do I go to my select board with a problem set and no options for action. Just let's brainstorm, let's figure this out. So I'm not trying to micromanage it, but I think it needs to be led.
Well, I think that's a good point, though, because as I understand it, this current committee was formed to explore whether forming a region out of the 6 towns is a good idea. Okay, it wasn't formed to say, let's try to figure out a solution to whatever we perceive our problems to be. And in fact, I'm not sure we even have a clear idea as a committee of what problems we are trying to solve. Okay, I think different people have different ideas about that, and we should talk about that at some point. But the committee's purpose is to sort of come back with a yes, either we think that an expanded region is a good way to go, and here's how it can work, or to come back and say, no, we don't, and here's the reasons we don't think so. So if we're going to get more grant money, what I think I'm hearing is that we're going to ask for more grant money because maybe something bigger is a better idea. Well, that's not, as you know, as David said, that's not a proposal. That's a kind of, let's sit around and brainstorm. Now, how much bigger? Who are we talking about? Which other, what, we're going to add more towns? Which other towns?
Well, I know that
So-
Deerfield already asked at one point to be part of this committee and was refused.
Right, because they figured the scope was, had to be remain limited.
Yeah, but my point is that Bill Montague may have voted for a 6-town district. The 4 towns of the Pioneer District did not limit it to 6 towns,
Okay,
which may mean that Bill Montague towns have to go back for another vote. I don't know. I don't know what your vote looked like.
okay. I think we might have the vote somewhere in our documentation.
It's got to be in your town meeting minutes because it had to be.
Oh,
a
I'm
town
sure it
meeting
is,
vote.
but I was going to say, I think that when Greg put a bunch of documents up on the original website, I think that may have been there. So
Might have been one of them.
I
Is
remember, I
that
think he
right,
was
or-
sort of,
Or could the school district have taken a vote and then the towns had to go along with it? I don't remember that part of the law.
for Gil Montague, the district voted and the towns voted. It was all sort of at the same time.
It
Everybody
was
was on.
2
board.
out of, the law was 2 out of 3. You needed a school committee, any 2 of school committee, select board, town meeting. You could mix and match them anyway, but you had to have 2 of the 3.
Oh, okay.
I'm learning.
I mean, that's how we
Well,
got
and
past
I
the
think,
Pioneer
I think
District.
if I can back up to Alan's suggestion that there was going to be money available, which is how we got into this. When the money's going to be available, you have to be ready to submit an application. So to have a discussion about whether we want to try to get more money and then what do we want the money for is appropriate right now. They're going to make money available. It's not just going to be an open-ended thing forever.
Right.
So we should have some discussion around that and maybe we need to be thinking, how would we word our request? Could we word it so that it makes sense, but does not commit us to a 28-town district or whatever? I'm not ready to suggest the wording.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll have to do is call Jay, find out, he did tell me how much, there was, well, I won't say, but it sounded like a good chunk of money. And I'll ask him when the deadline is. And maybe he can tell me if there's a way that the towns, can have like planning board 2, phase 2 as we continue our work in planning board 1. Because you're right, Jane, it's only going to be a limited. It's probably going to be first come, first serve. I think because, to use David's expression, we already have our toe in the water. I think they would be more apt to maybe lean our way. It's too bad the people in the Berkshires, those 8 towns are not closer, because they're really interested in the work that we've done and having a conversation about, what we saw as the pitfalls and how to proceed. And I guess they're having the same pushback. So I'll add it to the agenda if you think that's a good, or Mike, you can bring it up as part of your report, that maybe that should be on an agenda for not in, if we have the time, not in the December 17th meeting. If our timeline is crunched, then I'll just add it to this upcoming agenda before the 17th. If we have a little more time, then we can do it in the, I don't know, first week in January, whenever we decide we're going to meet again as a full planning board to vet that. In the meantime, I guess David could find out if the select boards, what their feeling is about this. We don't have to have a plan, but is that something they might support? And could they reach out to other select boards to in our area to see if there's interest there. And I didn't mean to exclude Gil Montague, but if you know of some districts, I wonder if that's a way we could go through. No, probably not, because I was thinking the school committee association, but no. Anything that goes with a school committee, I think, is not going to have a lot of support coming out of the gate.
Michael?
Yes,
So I really do think that a county-wide district makes a lot of sense, but I think that the legislation would be totally unworkable. So if we find out that DESI's sense of constituency or their sense of their regulations is that only a school district may apply for this funding, the towns could go through the governor's community compact program. And we actually got some money for the Heart Committee that way, Northfield and Warwick applying together for that. And we should definitely be talking to Deerfield. But, you know, we wouldn't have to have a massive 26x3 planning board if we didn't use the DESI enabled model. There's nothing to say that you have to do that before acting on a district. And I would say that 90% of all this is politics. I mean, 100% everything is, but understood as authoritative allocation of scarce societal resources. It's all politics. But there's a lot of emotion and provincialism and all sorts of things at play that come down to politics. So we need to think about, you know, how does our region work best? And I know my town doesn't work at its best by following all this public meeting notice and blah, 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 blah. It happens when people roll up their sleeves and do their best to abide this crap. But that's just baked in impossibility to have a 75-member planning board. My God.
Yeah,
well,
so
there's
yeah,
the law though that lays out the process for forming a regional school district though.
I bet it doesn't say there's a committee. There has to be a friggin'
I think it does say that.
yeah, there's a planning committee, but let me go back. We do have 9 towns in the Mohawk district that through Mike Bonacani before he left, was talking with legislators and working to see what they could do around consolidation and so forth. And the state is well aware that they have really the same problems, maybe even worse than our towns. So if we reached out to them, just the Mohawk district alone is I don't know if Roe was a part of that, but at least 8 towns. With Roe would be 9. And so right away, that now reaches out a little bit further to the western part of the state, and then you could swing around. Greenfield may be interested in at least try to geographically on a map have it look like we're more connected. We don't have this gap like we do now with Montague and us.
Can I ask what, I don't want to sound stupid or argumentative here, but what would be the purpose of a bigger district? Is it to save money? Is it to provide a better education? What's the goal?
All of the above.
Is there more than one goal? Because
Absolutely.
In my mind, it is.
Which, I missed what you said.
A larger population allows you to offer more courses, more in-depth courses. It allows you economies of scale and in administration, absolutely. So in the end, I don't think the dollar savings are going to be as great as one might wish, but I think the education you're offering to the students would be far better.
Okay, because I
We
I
have
agree with
lots
you.
of courses on the books, both of us, and we don't get enrollment enough to really hold those classes. If you had a larger population, you'd get the enrollment to hold those courses.
Well, so
Or
you
else
get,
we have to go back to when I went to school and it was reading, writing, arithmetic, and social studies. In fact, when I started school, it was geography and history. And along the way, it got combined into social studies, which I think was a mistake. But that's another topic.
well.
I
No.
remember that, but you hit on sure.
I just like to follow up because that works. The way I see it, that works if you end up getting the larger number of students in one place, in one building, or at least, basically in one building. So as you expand the number of towns involved, I mean, I already have questions about a district that it has Leiden on one end and Montague down at the other corner, and Warwick kind of off on the side there. You start adding towns from Mohawk. I mean, are we really going to get all high school kids in one building? Where's that building going to be?
No, you might have two high
No.
schools.
No, I think you might have 5 high schools with specialization, but the only way you're going to herd these cats into any kind of unison
Well,
is to have one overarching district so
but
that
how would
you can have a
that be
German
different?
class.
But if you have the 5 high schools, you still got to get everybody who wants to take German to go to one room, right?
No, let me, can
David, you're
let me
muted,
just shed a
David.
little bit of light. If you have one administration that can coordinate this for central office, your curriculum coordinator and so forth,
Okay.
one of the huge benefits, and I hate to say this as a benefit to the pandemic, but the pandemic forced something to happen that would have never happened before. And that is, we used to be dragging teachers, kicking and screaming to learn more about doing things online, offering curriculum online, being responsive, figuring out ways to grade and to evaluate and to have student participation. That would not have happened for maybe another 10 years if it wasn't for the pandemic. So because of the pandemic, people are developing expertise and delivering instruction online. If you had one administration, you don't have to have them all in one location now. You could offer Chinese, where somebody is doing that remotely to the various high schools. You could have science experiments. You could do a program of study, but it might be, David used the word specialization, but I remember when I was a principal years ago, we had this big satellite dish, and we would log in, and there would be an expert on the other end, and they would do science. It was based on science research and experiments and so forth. And we could see it in real time. We could call the kids, we would call in, and the kids could ask questions, and it was like they were almost right there. What was it called? God, it was in the early 90s. And so that was the first step really to start saying, gee, you can do things through the television and have kids ask their questions in real time and everyone heard it. So I don't want to belabor the point. So my point in summary is teachers are developing the skills they didn't have before, and we could have now a robust program of study where not everyone has to have the specialized language teacher, and all the other things that are in the program of study, but only 2 or 3 kids can take advantage of. Now they could sign up, and they could sign up in all these districts that participated. I will now be quiet.
Now, yes,
Lynn, go ahead.
would you be talking about the whole spectrum K through 12? Or are we talking with these specialized high schools, the high school piece? Because I think online can work really well with the older children. Perhaps starting in middle school, maybe not. But I think your elementary schools, a whole nother animal. So try to be clear about that. Henry?
Well, the way I see it is they would actually be in the classroom with a classroom teacher at the various sites who, and the kids would, be in that room where the computers were or whatever. And so although you had a lead instructor in a different district, they're not on their own to remotely do this. They have a resource there that can, guide them at least. So it's not like the kids would be sitting at a school district unattended and watching instruction and, like they're doing now at home.
But are we including the elementary kids in your proposal?
I don't know if I'm making a proposal, but yes, I had 5th and 6th graders that were doing this. I think I wouldn't be a proponent of that, K1, 2, 3, 4, but I think you can start doing some of that in 5 and 6, because that's when they're starting to, set the stage for what do they want to be taking in middle school and high school. And they need exposure, to Spanish, to Latin, to French, to make some decisions when they get to high school is which one do they want to focus on?
Okay, right, understand.
Okay, well, looks like we lost David. Not sure what happened.
Oh,
He can probably hear us. He usually is in the earshot of our conversation.
I can
Oh,
hear
okay.
everything.
He lost.
Okay, well, this definitely sounds like a bigger discussion. As I understand it, I'm expected at our full meeting next week to report on this meeting and say that we met as a subcommittee, talked about the consultant's report and our next steps. And so far I've got 2 next steps, maybe 3 next steps. One is to receive a copy of the consultant's report for those of us who don't have it. One is to set up a meeting with at least Joanne Blyer to go over the transportation report. And the third is to advocate for getting subor grant money for some purpose as yet to be determined. Is that all we want to say? Or do we have other next steps that we want to take?
Well, I don't know if the word advocate is the right word, because I think alerting the committee that there is more money available, and we had a general discussion about do we want to explore the towns going after that, or the districts, and how people are thinking about that. I think the other next step, Mike, would be a conversation about what is the subcommittee thinking in terms of when you do have your talking point document from your reactions to the report and how you'll roll that out to the public. Maybe have a conversation about what does that look like? How do you get that out and get feedback?
Okay,
I think we should focus on the facilities. That's part of our charge, and we haven't talked about them at all. And they might be a much easier thing to tackle than the Chapter 70 funding.
Yeah,
Mhm.
As far as I can see, the best we can do with the funding is to take the predictions on the Chapter 70 and forecast what we think each town is going to have to pay. But we
Well-
can't do that. We can't do that until the Education Committee says, we're going to add 20 classes, so you need 20 more teachers, or whatever they're going to say. But we need their input into funding costs, actual budget. So I think that we ought to focus first on the facilities, getting a cost analysis on that, how they might be used. And I haven't read that part of the document enough times. I know they said, take one high school for middle school and the other one for high school. And the question was asked, well, what about if we put them all in one building? But I think we could move someplace on that facilities question. But I don't know what the rest think, but anyway.
Well, how do you think we need to get more information, Jane, or do you think we just need to talk about the information we have?
Well, personally, I need to read the information we have and absorb it better than I have.
Okay,
Because the only thing that has stuck in my brain is high school at Gil Montague, middle school at PVRS. And that's not sufficient. We need to look at, okay, if we put the middle school at PVRS, does that utilize the whole building or only part of it efficiently? And the same thing for Gil Montague. You guys built a beautiful big facility over there. And probably you built it based on some population number. And Bessie probably said you have to have X number of square feet per child, which they usually do. And so you probably have a building bigger than you ever needed.
oh, we do.
And so, I think I'd like to look at efficient utilization of the buildings or inefficient utilization and put that on the table so that people understand that. But when we
I think that's
talked
a good
about
suggestion.
combining both middle and high school into Gil Montague, somebody said, well, they'll never fit. Well, I don't know. I don't know that that's true.
And that depends partly on your point earlier that the education, we need to know something about what are the programming going to be.
Right. And so that leaves, the argument could be that, well, that leaves PVRS empty. But does it? How could we utilize PVRS in a different way? Or if PVRS is the building we ought to utilize because it's most efficient, what do we do with Gil Montague? And if we abandon any of these buildings, are one or all of us going to have to repay the state some monies that they put forward to help build these buildings?
I wonder, Jane, if, first of all, I like the idea of focus, take something that's easier to chew and see what you can come up with. I like that idea. I'm wondering if you study the facilities and see, first of all, if you agree with a consultant's recommendation about putting the high school at Gil Montague and putting that there at Pioneer. Look at the space and how it could be used best for the number of kids that we're going to have in there. Look at how many classrooms you have, how many kids you're going to put in there, what might be available, and then kick that over to the education subcommittee and say this seems to have a lot of promise for the middle school, because if you're going to upset the apple cart and start busing people over there, it better have a really good benefit on the education side to be doing that. And Gil Montague appears to have facilities that are geared more toward high school kind of activities. So now I'm being biased, I guess. I don't know why I'm saying that, but I remember back and looking at what they had, I thought, wow. And I went to a few games there to watch, and I was pretty impressed.
You're right.
It was a nice campus. So so the other part would be, you're looking at the high school and you're talking about, how you see those facilities more maybe slanted toward or better suited for the high school population. And the spaces that are available and how many kids would be in there in total. And then again, you kick it over to the education subcommittee and say, this is what we're seeing as a subcommittee in the utilization. Now, go to work. Do you agree? So that they have the ideas from your committee, and then they blend that with what they're thinking for what programs might be available and go from there. I mean, I don't know. Maybe when you look at it all, you say, you know what, we ought to just put them all in one place. I don't know. I hate to be making decisions just for political reasons. There's really got to be a good educational reason for putting all the middle school kids together and taking advantage of a facility and utilizing it better. And then the high school. And it would be up to the education subcommittee to struggle with, and what is the middle school going to be? Is that a 6 through 8 middle school? Is it a 5 through 8 middle school? So that can be, something that they have to grapple with. When I was at Groton Dunstable, it was actually 5 through 8 for the middle school, but they had 2 separate buildings right on campus. So it was easy to have one administration, principals, special education, and so forth. But the population, although they did go into each other's buildings and actually used to walk outside every day, even in the snow, to get from one building to another, it worked really well. So you could kick it over to them and have them decide that part. Did you get all that, David?
I got to admit,
muted.
Am I muted now?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. I did miss a little bit of that. I took a phone call. I'm not going to
So
argue.
basically, Jane was suggesting that that you focus on the facilities piece and really study the buildings and see what's available, and if you agree with the consultant's recommendation to if you're going to upset the apple cart, do you have the space that's appropriate for middle school at Pioneer and the high school over the other side, and then kick it over the education subcommittee if you agree with that for your analysis of those 2 facilities. And
I
that's
wonder if anybody heard what I heard when I asked about what was any consideration giving to consolidating under one roof. And the indication I heard was that there's space at Gil Montague, but we thought that was political suicide. So we didn't look at it.
I heard
Right.
that.
Well, that's part of the question that needs to be discussed and suggestions made. If we ultimately said, yes, they ought to all be under junior or middle school and high school should be under one roof. And this is what we think should happen with the other building.
So,
And we-
so I guess another way to put it is, let's identify our sacred cows. In Warwick, we have a sacred cow. It is that we're going to have our own elementary school. And we're going to have our own elementary school. That's our sacred cow. We have a large building that was built to accommodate at least 150 students. And with 40, we operated in the whole dang building. Maintaining that kind of presence in that building in our new iteration is not a sacred cow. It is a crusade I'm on, that we're not going to behave that way in that luxurious fashion. There's a senior center, other community uses to combine the use of the building and make it sane. So we have a sacred cow, which was, we're not going to close any buildings. And if that's what we all agree on, fine, but I don't.
Well, I think that's what I'm saying, David. So we're not going to close the building, whatever building it is, but what are we going to use it for? You know, Northfield need the bigger senior center. Northfield needs administrative space for their police department. Their fire department needs to be rebuilt. The high school can't manage the fire department, but they could manage the police and the senior center. And, you know, who knows what Berniston might decide they need over there. Yes, we have a senior center. It was the envy of the county when it opened, but now it's among the very smaller senior centers of the county. So maybe there's some space that is needed for that.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, we have to open our minds. We have to look further ahead than the next 2 years. And we have to be creative without busting the bank.
And the Pioneer School Committee and the majority of the 4 towns members, select boards have been very clear that there's not a concern with stranding a town with assets, or there shouldn't be one for districts. We need to do things that make sense.
Yeah.
Do
And
we think,
I think our 4 towns were very clear that we needed to look into the future, that we can't keep going the way we're going.
Yeah, closing Warwick and Leiden was kind of like burning the furniture to stay warm.
do you think we should look at getting professional evaluations of the buildings, specifically the high school, middle school, high schools in both districts?
But you're mentioning some things, Mike, that could very well go into that next round of funding. There are
Okay,
a lot of things that this committee needs to do that we are not capable of, either because of expertise or time.
Okay,
And that's why I said, you know, we need to think about how we would word a request for more money. And it doesn't have to be just that we're not convinced that 6 towns is the right configuration. It's other things.
okay. I mean, how do other people feel?
They feel numb.
I
Well, no,
feel that we need to
Apparently.
know who DESI would recognize as a legitimate applicant. And we need to know, is there a deadline, or is this a rolling thing until they've run out of money?
Well, let's just talk about, do we think that getting a professional evaluation would be a good idea? I agree, we don't have any money to do it.
I believe in the Pioneer District, since the high school, middle school is in Northfield, and Warwick's and Northfield's building and energy committees are very active. We've got a lot of that. The deficiency that comes to mind at the Northfield campus to me is the not having an understanding of the capabilities of the ventilation system, if any.
Ventilation,
a lot
heating,
of the heating and
and the roof.
and a lot of these things have been addressed in Pioneer pretty well. Berniston's all over their building. They're not looking at any surprises, I don't think.
I hope not.
Well, I guess,
So,
you know, my inclination is that, I mean, that all sounds good, but I'm not a big expert on this sort of thing. And I get the impression that consultants aren't either. They took walkarounds of the 2 middle buildings, and they didn't mention the elementary schools at all. And they basically talked to the facilities managers and took what they said pretty much at face value. And my feeling is that for due diligence, we ought to try to do a little better than that. Not suggesting that we'll find out something different, but I'm not sure that we're really doing our job if we just say, oh yeah, you know, the consultants say they talked to some people and everything looks good. So here we go. And the consultants did in fact mention that that the Pioneer building is on a septic tank and a well, and that those should be looked at if it's going to continue to be used or maybe expanded in any way.
Well,
No, my
they,
experience with septic tanks, I've got a whole town of septic tanks, is the less you use them, the longer they last. And we're running half as many students as design. I'm also pretty familiar with the design standards because I'm a public or private school trustee and have been engaged in expansions in Massachusetts and experimental septic systems. Do not worry about the septic system at Pioneer. It used to have 1,400 people contributing to it.
well,
Okay,
and
okay.
the other point is that those
Well,
systems,
maybe that sort
the
of thing should
wells
be
have to be
documented.
tested every year. And the septic system every 3. I'm not sure about how often that has to be tested, but I know the wells have to be tested every year.
Well, the wells
Okay.
have to be tested every month. The water system has to be tested every month.
Every month?
Every month.
Well, there presumably are records of all that stuff then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's a
I
public
mean,
water.
I don't think that those
Oh, I'm
wells,
sorry. You know what? If it's on a public water system, like Northfield and Bernardston elementaries, it's on a public water system, it's tested. You might have to take a sample, but Warwick and Leiden, and if Pioneer is on private wells, they have to have a water system operator and monthly tests.
Okay,
And
all I'm saying
yeah.
is we don't have any documentation on any of that
right.
in the
Well, you know,
report.
I really think we need to be more engaged in the concept and really looking at the intricacies of the existing buildings. It seems more like creating another barrier to me than a way to move this thing forward. Unless you know, scrapping 2 schools that we're functioning out of, or maybe 4 or 5, and building an all new one is part of what we're thinking about.
Let me comment if I could on, did you want to go, Lynn?
No, I'm good. I'm all ears.
So I want to comment on if you're looking for some direction, I certainly can support the subcommittee spending its first focus on the facilities and having a better understanding of you know, what's available, and then kick it over to the education subcommittee. When you're talking about the facilities, you know, towns don't like surprises, and maybe the Pioneer District and Gil Montague has already done this, but if you were to bring in an architect or bring in these people and look at the facilities you have, I mean, we know the square footage, we know what rooms are available. You'd want to take a look at where the population would be, and could part of the building be then leased out? You know, at Mohawk, we actually rented a wing out to the Franklin Bay State Medical Center, and they operated a clinic out of the building, and we got rent for that. So the architect that would come in would look at how good is your, you know, how long's your boiler going to last? How long's the roof going to last? What are the things that you're going to have to be paying attention to over the next, you know, I'll say 20 years. And so they give sort of a comprehensive view of the structure, the maintenance, or deferred maintenances that have happened, what systems are going to have to be replaced, clean regularly. Maybe they discover that the ducts have mold in them, or I don't know. But if you're trying to get a handle through an architect, maybe that work's been done. David, you've been on the committee for a long time, so you may know that you know, they've been involving. They have a 5-year plan that is doing the maintenance part, but do they really have a handle on things like big structure issues or roofing issues or boiler issues or whatever? If not, then that's
No, they don't
probably
have
good.
They don't have a handle on anything. It's turning into a blessing that Warwick got its building back. We found one of the 3 air handlers didn't have a belt on it, and there was a 5 horsepower motor running all the time. because the terminals had welded together. We got the building and
Whoa.
everyone. Why is there, such an expensive electric bill for an empty building?
This is where
So there's so much pressure financially that deferred maintenance has been killing the towns. There's a good case to be made that there should be a assessment of the buildings, because it would just be such a cost savings to identify things and do a stitch in time.
Lynn,
So this is where I think you get a professional building inspector, like on a small scale with homes. Anytime a home is sold, they talk about, you absolutely want this professional building inspection. And it's amazing what they turn up, even in something that looks wonderful. So that would be the place to go. Start with a professional building inspector who brings in then their specialists in all the mechanicals and the structural stuff, and if you need a structural engineer to assess things and so forth. And if that's what you're thinking of, I would suggest that's where you go.
well, I think that would be a good idea. I mean, and David, I don't see this as just putting up another roadblock. I see it as checking another box. I think that we would not be doing our job as a subcommittee if we said, oh, well, we just don't think that's, we agree that buildings seem fine and we didn't look into it any more than that. I think we should present evidence that we did look into it, and either they're fine or they're not, but that we've got some reason.
Right.
Hey,
We've
Alan,
got
what do
more
you
than
think
we
about
have.
reaching out to the school building authority and seeing if they have any provision for a small grant? This seems like a little bit of field of going back to DESI for more wider planning money to dig down this deep, but it seems right in the wheelhouse of the school building authority, who finance these new constructions. And if nothing else, somebody there who likes to see more brand new school projects through might see it as an opportunity to show us why we need one.
Right. Well, that's a good idea. I mean,
Another possible funding source might be that community compact, a 6-town.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
I would be very interested in knowing if the air is being turned over as many times as it's supposed to in all of these buildings. And that means a test in each room of the building. We've
Now,
done
are we
that in
talking-
Bernardston, and really interesting that we found 3 rooms that weren't having the air turned over at all. There was no air return in 3 rooms.
wow.
Granted,
it
they
been
were
built
small
over?
rooms, but it's been remedied now. Bernardston's paying the bill.
So wouldn't that be in the scope of what we're doing though? If we were, and David, you mentioned some other sources, DESI, SBA, but if you follow with Jane's suggestion of focusing on the facilities, and you're looking at it from, availability, size, and what you would do with that, or for recommendations to get feedback from the public on, you concurrently apply for a grant through this. Again, it's telling them we're interested in really having a better handle of the long range view of maintaining these buildings if we're in a 6-town regional. I think that's a natural progression of saying, you know what, we'll give you some money to do that study, because it seems now that would be the next step for you. So you have your eyes wide open as you're looking through all of the aspects of one regionalization district. So you've identified with that 3 funding sources. We wouldn't need permission, right, from the towns if we're really just expanding the scope of our work to focus now on one of the areas that was in the report. Because like
Well, we
Jane
don't know.
said,
The
So,
only problem,
Alan, I'd be fine with it. I'd be fine if DESI wants to pay for it. I just didn't see it, but if that's possible, for sure. I'm not sure that we, the committee, are the applicant. It was the Gil Montague School District. And so we're back to that issue. a conversation, I wouldn't go to community compact for a turn down. Sometimes you want to turn down in order to make the ask of the place you're going, to say, no, they said no, they said no. So school building authority saying no, which they probably will do, wouldn't be a bad thing.
Mhm.
I'd be kind of for asking for the baby brother, even though we only want a puppy, and say, well, some of us are thinking that we need to look at the whole county-wide. And we should do an assessment of all the school buildings in the county, because that might inform us how we might want to recombine. You know, if a district was at end of life and everybody's got around the county has room, somebody might think this is an opportunity to make a sidestep here and recombine. So knowing the condition of all, what you're saying, it applies to my vision for a wider, larger district. And then we're back to the same problem. Which of these facilities do we want to, concentrate our efforts in?
The only problem I see with getting professionals in to inspect the buildings is that when a deficiency is found, the school district could be required to correct it.
What makes you think that?
Oh,
Experience.
because there's a building code, and if the building code says,
Oh, sure. Okay.
and we found we're going to have to, there are plenty of non-compliant building code issues that through constant operation you can avoid. So it'll probably be the health and sanitary code violations, not having enough ventilation, but the building code has ventilation standards for different buildings too. I think it's 4 changes of air an hour,
Mm.
3 or
We
4.
really want to be saying that we don't want to get the buildings evaluated because we're afraid we might find something that we'd have to fix?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we should include the owners of the buildings in our decision to have this done. But we plan to do this. Do you have an objection? And if they think that it's fine to have their building inspected, then that's fine.
And in our case at Pioneer, that means town of Bernston. How do you feel about poking around? Because the towns are responsible for their elementary schools and respectively, not collectively.
Well, are we saying we're going to evaluate all of the buildings or just the 2 high schools? I thought
Scope
we-
of the study was middle school and high school. So I guess I'd be talking about focusing on that. I do want to go back though to the point that if they find a deficiency, and it's a code violation, they're going to expect it to be on a remediation plan to get it fixed. Don't ask, don't tell. Once they discover something, if the school district has been doing deferred maintenance and they discover that you don't have 3 cubic square feet for each kid, or you don't have the proper turnover of ventilation. I mean, remember the days that, the teachers used to put their desk next to the univent so that they could stay warm. And then they use that as a bookshelf and they'd be putting their books and stuff over it. So, they were cutting off the very purpose of the univents. So I think we got to keep our eyes wide open on that, because I do think they will find deficiencies, and I do think there'll be an obligation for the districts to fix them. And then it will be like, look what you did.
Lynn,
There's such a thing as grandfathering though. Where you do not have to bring things up to code if it was to code at that time. But if there are health hazards, one just absolutely should report things like that if somebody's going to be hurt because of what you find. But I don't think if you find certain things that you need to be forced to, say, make an 8-foot ceiling into a 10-foot ceiling. Those are kinds of code things that
Yeah, I don't think they would be
Eh,
called on that. What they will be called on is the air handlers. If the classrooms and,
Yeah.
and the public rooms are not having the air changed the proper number of times, they will be told they need to fix that.
Yeah, because that's a health ed.
You're right. And that,
Well-
that's COVID. How many years have we been going with not having the air changed as it should be? And we've had people complaining about that. Didn't go anyplace until this year.
Sure. And mold. I mean, mold's a biggie. That's a real health hazard.
So what are
So-
we
so-
doing with all this conversation?
Going in circles.
Well, not quite. I'm taking some notes, but we haven't come up with a lot of to-dos out of this yet. I'd like to get it clear, though. The question was raised, are we talking about all of the buildings, including the elementary schools, or just the middle school, high school? It's true that the consultant's report was aimed at consolidating the middle school, high school, on the assumption that the elementary schools would remain whatever as is. I mean, obviously, Pioneer proceeded to close a couple of them. I think in terms of the buildings, it would make sense to consider all of the buildings, because if there's a new district, that new district is going to be using all of the buildings. And so I think that people should be aware of what they're getting into, not just in the middle school, high schools, but in the elementary schools as well.
I think so. Too.
I sort of agree with you, but I also think that this might be the time to have in the new district agreement language that says that each town is responsible for their elementary school. And it can't be just that kind of language, because supposedly in our district, the agreement is that the district takes care of the buildings that they're leasing from the towns, the elementary schools, except for capital expense. But when the district does not take care of something in the building and lets the maintenance go and go and go, it eventually becomes a capital expense. I'd like to figure out wording so that the town is responsible for the building and the, what do you call it? The heating and all of that maintenance. The town is responsible for all of the maintenance. The school is responsible for the day-to-day cleaning. Something
about
like
having-
that.
What about having the district be responsible, take over all the buildings?
Sell
there
the
a reason the
buildings to the
towns-
district so they own the building?
Yeah, is there a reason why the towns continue to own the buildings that the district is using?
The
Because that's the
hangover
way the
from the
district
1990s.
agreement is written, right?
Well, exactly, but is there a reason? I mean, I'm just throwing this out. I mean, we do have,
Well, I think
this is an
that's
effort-
something, that's what we need to discuss. How do we want to handle the elementary schools?
Mhm.
Do we want to
Okay.
have at least, how does Gil Montague do it? Are you leasing Gil elementary
We
schools
do-
to the district?
in Montague, we lease the buildings for $1 to the district. And we have a
Well,
similar
and
agreement. They're supposed
we-
to sort of provide maintenance. We provide capital. And as you say, maintenance gets deferred and it becomes capital. And
Right.
it's a problem.
I'd like to figure out how to get around that situation.
I think there's
Okay.
one that, that a smart attorney can devise for us.
Lynn, didn't quite hear that?
I could not understand anything you just said, Lynn. Could you say it again?
I'd say, I think there is good language that an astute attorney can draft. I mean, that is this, I mean, that's their expertise, is drafting that kind of language. We're lay people. We
But,
shouldn't be practicing law.
I think there's also a structural question, because I know back when there were budget troubles at Gil Montague, it was every year we get told, well, if you don't give us the money we want, you know, it was a combination of things. The first thing that'll go is maintenance. The
Yes.
first thing that'll go is sports, and the first thing that'll go is art and music.
Yes.
And maintenance was always true.
And,
They
and
did
then you
not.
let the roofs fail. So then
And-
you really got a big capital expense.
So, I mean, you can have all the language you want, but if the district says we can't afford to do it, or, oh, you want us to take care of these buildings, well, okay, there goes your, you know, band class or whatever. What are you gonna do?
So we got a little extortion going on.
Exactly, so I think it's worth exploring whether it's simply having the district own the building and say, you own it, you take care of it, you make it work. You decide, you know, here's the money that you get to work with. You can spend some of it on long-term debt and you can spend some of it on short-term maintenance, and you get to decide what the best mix is. We have a number of things coming out of this meeting. What we don't have, and it is now, well, I said it would last 2 hours. I don't know how people feel. That seems like about enough time. So we got another 20 minutes if that's true. I mean, at some point we have to decide how we're going to proceed on these things. We've talked about getting some sort of professional evaluation of the buildings. You know, my suggestion on that, I agree with Jane that we ought to let the owners know. We might go further and ask the owners if they can help us do that.
Well, we
because
should
maybe some
first
of the
ask
stuff-
them if they already have some of these reports.
Exactly, because they may well, and that would save everybody a lot of time and money. But somebody's, you know, do we want to proceed with contacting the owners after this meeting is done? If so, who's going to do that?
Well,
Um,
and
I
does that
think
mean
that's-
contacting the school committee or what?
Well, the
Right.
school committee, you know, Montague, the school committee owns the middle school, high school, but Gill owns the Gill Elementary and Montague owns its 2 elementary schools. So it's the 2 towns and the district.
Mike, I don't think we're ready to do that yet. I think we
Okay.
need to take the report that the consultants gave us and understand everything they said about facilities. And then I think we should design in our own, each of us, since we can't gather around a table, how to use those 2 buildings, how we each individually see the most practical way to use those 2 buildings, whether it's, you know, one school in one level in each school or whatever it is. And we're going to have to do that based on the floor plans that they supplied us, because we're not going to
Okay.
be able to walk through the buildings either. But I think we should come up with our thoughts on how to use those buildings before we decide that we want to go out and inspect them.
Okay,
And then when we kind of have it gelled, our best recommendation for utilization, then we could ask them about inspection stuff. Where are the reports on your roof and its structure? Where are the reports on your whatever, everything? Air handlers, your furnace, when was that last inspected, and what is the expert saying about that? All that
So
stuff.
what you might, yeah, so what you might want to do, Jane, is once you've done the first thing you've talked about, and so you have a recommendation of here's what the buildings, you know, here's how the building should be utilized. You kick that over to the education subcommittee and say, we've studied this, whatever, this is what we're thinking. They then vet that through their process of going out to the community and sharing the educational programs and so forth. And they can do it in the context of how those buildings would be utilized. And then concurrently, while that's happening, then you can then turn your attention to the actual long-range plan of each facility. And then you dig deeper into the lifespan, I guess I'll say, of the operational systems within the schools.
Yes, I like that. And I think concurrently, we should be understanding the transportation and looking at that. And that ought to keep us busy morning, noon, and night.
Okay, well, and I'll raise my hand and say, I don't feel I have really any expertise in trying to figure out how those buildings could be used. I mean, there's a bunch of rooms there, but in terms of, I'm not sure from what we have in the consultant's report, whether it's even clear which ones are classrooms versus other types of spaces, which ones have whatever. I mean, what's a good, what's a good, I mean, I think there's I mean, I could offer an opinion, but I don't think I would trust my opinion to be worth a whole lot. On the other hand, that might be something that if they're willing, the business managers of the districts might be helpful with, or some other people in the district. Maybe let's just say the districts generally might be able to be helpful with, to say, okay, you know, what are the kind of parameters of this facility? You know, here's, you know, how many students can it accommodate, and what sort of configurations would that mean in terms of, you know, numbers of classes, how things would be arranged.
Well, I don't think we can put that back on the school district to do for us.
Okay.
And that's
All
where I
I'm
would
saying
see
is I'm not sure I
consultant
could,
money coming in.
be particularly good at doing it. So I'm open to suggestions.
So here's a real wild idea. What would happen is if you had a joint meeting of the education subcommittee and the facilities, transportation, finance subcommittees. You had a joint meeting, and this was the only focus of the meeting, to talk about you know, your role in terms of facilities and what they think you should be looking at. Of course, you should have some clear ideas of what you're looking at, and then and have them, in the context of the educational programs, talk about whether they agree or you know, with the consultant's recommendations. So we start with everybody's on the same page. If it turns out that, yeah, the high school should be over at Gil Montague, the middle school should be over at Pioneer, now you're on the same page, and so they can make that part of their work in terms of, here are the programs that could be offered in those facilities, and you'd be focusing on then on the meat and potatoes of the actual lifespan of the facilities, which you
Well,
might get expertise help in.
the education committee, I believe, is also charged with a facilities question. Are they not? Because they can't decide to have 10 English classes and 20 math classes and 6 social studies classes and 10 language classes and not know that they have enough classrooms for it unless they look at facilities.
Right, that's why I was suggesting a joint meeting, because there's an overlap between the use of the buildings and who's going to be using them, and what they see is in terms of agreeing with or not with the consultant's recommendation. So at least, so neither of you are wasting time, you could maybe come to some agreement on that issue, and then you'll each approach it from a different point of view. Maybe we get the tail, they get the trunk, but it's all around how the facilities are going to be used educationally.
Assuming, I mean, do people want to look at the consultant's report that we do have from August? I'm looking at page 18.
Okay.
Which is second and third floor, just to pick an example of Turner's Falls. And I'm looking at that, and I don't really know how to estimate what the capacity of those rooms is, or or really much of anything about them. I can make some guesses about some things. Some of them are clearly bigger, some of them are clearly smaller. I think that having a lot more familiarity with,
Well,
what's
I
really
think
there. So I'm just saying, if we were to have a joint meeting with the Education Subcommittee, what are we going to be looking at? And what we have to look
I
at.
think we do need to study their report. Because if you go
Okay.
back to page 15, it says there are approximately 65 classrooms, learning areas with 45 for the high school and 20 for the middle school. You're talking about Turner's Falls.
Right.
So I think we definitely need to read this
So
report
should we just say that we're gonna study this more
more.
and
And see what-
then go from there?
Right.
Okay.
And Alan, maybe, it's a good idea to have a joint meeting with the Education Committee. But if we have a joint meeting with the Education Committee, that's almost a full meeting of the committee.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
Yes.
think it leaves anybody out.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So,
I think
do we
just
dare
have
put
a-
this? Do we dare put some discussion of this on the agenda? At least that we need to cooperate on the facilities, or,
You might want to just share that you're thinking about it might be beneficial to have both those subcommittees come together, and since they're going to form a quorum, that it might be good to have it on a future agenda, and just
Yeah.
put that idea out there that, it's kind of a little difficult to look at, facilities now, just facilities in that context, without looking at what the education subcommittee is thinking for the use of the facilities, and see if they've already, they may have already come up with, they agree with the recommendations of the consultants, and for whatever reason, the pros and cons, and then that, okay, you got your two buildings that you'll be bringing forward in terms of the sharing with the public and getting their input, and then you can let that go and focus on structures and systems,
right.
do due diligence there. Mike, do you think you have enough for this meeting to, give a review of, there's been a lot of discussion. What you haven't talked about would be, what are people's ideas in terms of how you'd roll this out? Once you have your talking points, you've assimilated this information that you are going to be bringing forth for input from the different stakeholders, how do you plan on doing that? Do you plan on having some articles in the paper? Do you plan on getting on select board's agenda and maybe phoning in and having an agenda item that you can all talk about it? Do you plan on trying to have a public forum at some point out, and what materials would you have? I have, by the way, I don't know why they wanted me to get him out of there, but Gil Montague wanted me to take all the supplies and materials that we had. So I drove over with my truck. I got everything. I happen to have a decent sized garage, so I put it all in there and sort of wrapped it up. So when we get to the point that we need to start mailing things and need to run things off, we have those supplies in waiting, because that was the intent of them.
So one thing I think we should try to do is, how do you say, come to some kind of consensus about the report. to make sure that people feel comfortable with the recommendations that the consultants are giving us, because I'm not sure that I've heard that we're at that point. So once we want to roll things out, we need to decide what we're going to roll out.
Exactly.
Missing something.
Well, and we're not going to roll things out as subcommittees, are we? It's going to be from the full committee.
I would agree. I think so. Yes.
Well, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking that since once you have all of this together and there's so much work to be done, or so many stakeholders to get in touch with, that the education subcommittee would have all of all the information. We'd have all their information, and I guess in one sense it's the full planning board, but we would be collectively joining our efforts and putting out there. The PR committee can, take the piece and write articles for the paper and disseminate information to the towns and maybe get on their agendas. Other folks might be hosting forums. So we'll have to divvy it up,
But what I'm
I
trying
think.
to say is, are all the members here, for example, like in this subcommittee, what are we in agreement on? I think we should have that discussion. And I think the education committee probably is doing the same. And then you look at your joint forces and say, okay, are we in agreement? What are
Well,
we?
I guess my feeling is that whatever we come up with should come from the full committee,
Correct.
and that the rollout process itself will be handled by a number of people, but there won't be a distinction between, well, I'm from the Finance, Transportation, Facilities Subcommittee, so here's my piece, or I'm from the Education Committee, so here's my piece.
On
I mean,
that.
I think that there should be some sort of unified
Right.
presentation.
That's what
But-
I'm trying to get at. So
Yeah.
how can we pull this together so that the whole committee can agree on what?
Right, and I think that, I agree, I think that that's something that we should talk about. We haven't agreed on much other than we want to look at this and decide
Right.
if it's a good idea.
Well, I would not want the consultant's report to be put out to the public and have the public think that that's the report from this committee, because we haven't decided that we accept that whole report. That was
Agreed.
input for our use to get to a decision.
Right,
It's,
I agree,
it's not,
I agree.
I know it's a public document, but we have to make it clear that it's not the answer to the public. It's for our use in reaching a recommendation.
Right,
Agreed.
yeah, I mean, there's no reason
So
for us to hide it, but I think that we should also, there's no reason for us to present it unless we happen to come to the conclusion that the consultant's report mirrors our own thoughts and it's the best way of putting them.
So before
let-
our
let
next
me put a
meeting,
structure-
should we each
I was
read?
gonna put a structure around this. Because you're saying, I think, the same thing. The structure around this is the education subcommittee is looking at programs and services to kids and advantages and disadvantage and so forth. The transportation facilities committee, you're looking at it from your perspective. That information, and once the subcommittees have completed their work, all come together to the full committee, and you're giving updates along the way to the full planning board. Once that has happened, then we have the larger discussion from the subcommittees, and do we agree now with this all the information that the various subcommittees came up with? We talk that through. If we're in agreement, then we put together the final document of what we agreed on to bring forward and what we've decided we're not agreeing on. That is then the impetus for what we are bringing forward as a planning board to everybody for input. So I think I've heard Jane say that. I've heard Lynn say that. I've heard you say that, Mike. So I don't know if you're realizing that, but that's really kind of the structure that was supposed to happen. And if you don't agree with that structure, then we should be having that conversation at our meeting on December 17th.
Well, then I think,
Because
I do agree, Alan. I think that sounds good, but I think we might have gotten a little off track, you know, if talking about how we plan to roll out something, because it's not going to be this subcommittee rolling out anything separately from what's rolled out by the entire board. The board's going to roll something out when the time comes, and we're, as
it is, I
we're all
guess,
members of the board,
you're
and
right.
we're going to be part of that rollout. But we're
You're
not going to
right.
be doing anything different from that.
Right, you're absolutely right. I guess where I was coming from is you may have some thoughts about how this should be rolled out. The education subcommittee will have some thoughts about how it should be. The full planning board will put those things together and come up with the strategy of how it finally will happen.
Okay.
Right.
And
And you asked-
I thought it would be more efficient to have it done at subcommittee suggestions and then bring it forward when we get to that point.
Well,
you asked-
I
you
agree
made a-
with you, but my point is, we're not ready to have that discussion and make that recommendation for rollout. We have
Right.
work to do before we get there. I
Right,
want to
which-
go back through I want to go back through the consultant's report, the current consultant's report, and I wish I had a hard copy so I could write on it, but I'm not printing off all these pages. I agree
Let
with
me
this
see what I can
paragraph.
do
I
on that.
disagree with that one. That's what I want to do.
Yep.
And I agree that should happen first. But Alan, you made a number of suggestions, and just to answer your question, articles in the newspaper, meeting with select boards, some sort of public presentation. Yes.
When
think we
is the
should be doing-
question that left unanswered?
Well,
Well,
after
that may
we
not
have
be until
something,
May.
after we have
Yeah.
something to present. I mean,
Right.
we've been encouraged to keep an open mind. I am trying to continue to keep an open mind. There is a lot of information at this point that I feel that I don't have. The vision of having a school district that offered a better education is a wonderful vision. But I don't feel that I am in a position to say that the 6 towns merging the 2 existing school districts, I don't know what I feel the probability is that will result in anything close to that vision, and not just result in more of what we have now, only bigger, which in my personal opinion would be a bad thing. I see some definite downsides to Montague for getting into a situation where it's not a big fish in a small pond. It's a big fish in a bigger pond, without as much control over what happens. And I'm not saying that that's a deal killer, but it's definitely, as a representative of Montague, that's one of my concerns. And I feel that we don't have, as Jane says, we don't have any idea what the budget of this district going forward is going to be. We have a simulation for fiscal 21 from the consultants with no real indication of how to project that into the future. I think if we're going to have anything like that, we're going to have to do it ourselves and then compare it with the estimates about Chapter 78 and local contributions, and make some estimates about what that means for town contributions and assessments. But I think, which I think is going to be a big question, because I agree, I don't think we're going to save a whole lot of money out of this. There's no indication we're going to save very much money from any configuration. But depending on the educational program that people like, it could also end up being more expensive. I mean, and because let's face it, you want to offer more programs, you want to do more of this, you want to do more of that. If you add more money, you certainly can. So
Well,
the question is,
Mike,
how's it all going to work?
in fairness, if we if we want to compare, if we want to talk about the cost of a larger district, at the same time, we need to be projecting the cost of the individual districts.
I agree. And the consultant's report does offer those two things, one for Pioneer and one for Gil Montague. And those both look very different.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure I accepted their premises on some of that stuff.
Right.
That's what I
Well,
need to
I
study up.
remember you're at the time, you having some questions, and that's another thing. I mean, there again, I think part of whatever we present should be, the sort of do nothing. If we don't do this, what's it going to look like? Well, if we don't agree with the consultant's projections, there again, I think we have the tools to say, well, we don't agree with that. Let's see what, let's make the assumptions we do like and see what that looks like. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe better, maybe worse. We can certainly do that. We haven't done it yet.
I'm going to have to go in a little bit because I've got another meeting I've got to have, but David had something he wanted to say, and I wanted to hear what his perspective was before I have to sign off. If I saw him
Okay,
raising his
sure.
hand a few times.
Oh,
But
no,
I
Jane
don't
answered it.
know.
It was just that it's a public document and that's all. I mean, it needs to be represented as draft and, to the committee. And I would say when we accept the report, it doesn't mean we agree with it, but so we might want to, at some point. And then to Mike, when I'm on this committee, I'm serving Warwick. I'm here by virtue of school committee. But when I'm on the school committee, I'm serving the district. And that's kind of a different perspective. I don't know how it is if you're just elected from Montague and you represent Montague at the district, but in the Pioneer District, we're all elected district-wide. So
I'm
we're
not on the school committee. I'm not on the school committee.
Oh, okay. There we go.
We don't
No,
have
that's for you to take
a
up.
Montague member of the school committee on this board.
Something in your future, man.
Right.
All right, so Mike, you certainly have enough to chew on and sort of wrap up in an update to the committee about a number
I
of
think
issues
so.
that we
And,
raised.
you guys can help me out when the time comes. And I don't want to sound too negative, but I was basically trying to make the point that I think there are a number of unanswered questions. And I'm happy to accept the consultant's report as being, this is what we're going to get from them. But that's different from saying, I think that we have been provided all the information that we need to make a good evaluation.
Yeah, just remember the consultants' reports, because there was more than one consultant. We actually have 3 consultants' reports. That's one data point. It's up to us to go out and get the rest of the data as it pertains to the towns involved and the overall 6-town regional, which is why people are looking at what are the pros and cons for Gil Montague, what are the pros and cons for Pioneer, and what are the pros and cons if it was one 6-town regional. So, and that's so important to do, because what might be good for one district might be a con for another district and vice versa. So we've got to look at this from each of those perspectives and then eventually blend it. We can't just blatantly say, this is good, this is a con, or this is a pro, and just assume it's a pro for both districts and a pro for a 6-town regional. I don't think we're going to find that. We'll find the commonalities in some areas, but I think we're going to find, well, what was a big plus? Well, let's take the finances. What's a big plus over here is not so much on the other side. So that's what we have to vet out.
Right.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to have to go. Do you want a motion to, I'm ex officio, so I can't really make it, but Are you done, or I can
Well-
leave the meeting? You can.
No,
Does
I
anyone-
would like to decide when our next meeting is and what's going to be on that agenda so we can do our homework. We've talked about a lot of directions that we ought to go. But we
Okay.
need to choose a path.
Jane,
Well-
send me an email. I've got to go.
Okay, I will, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Is there anyone who wants to have a meeting before January?
No,
Okay, it's unanimous then.
well, I don't
Um,
know that. I'm just saying from my perspective, no.
Well,
I-
Jane, how does this sound?
Well, I don't see how we can. Next week, we have the full committee meeting. The following week is Christmas week. Probably nobody wants it then. And then we have the week between Christmas and New Year's,
Well, that's
when
my
we all
point.
want to hibernate.
That's what I'm getting at. How about if we figure that I will contact Joanne Blyer and see if I can set up a meeting with her, and that we will expect that to be our next meeting.
That would be wonderful.
And I'll invite, once I've done that, I can invite Tanya and, see if she
Right.
wants to come. In the meantime, Jane, if you would like to look at the Pioneer 5-year projections and identify areas where you think the assumptions maybe are a little off, just if you feel like doing that, if you're looking,
Yeah.
if you're looking for something to do.
Oh, I have
Um,
nothing to do.
I didn't think you did. But I'm
Can-
thinking but that's a step that can be taken, I think, without collecting a lot more information, maybe,
Right.
that would move things forward.
I'm
I
not
would-
sure that I can add anything to what they projected out
Well, I
in
think
a
there were
positive fashion, but
well, I
maybe.
think there were some assumptions about like things like town contributions and things that I remember you're sort
Oh.
of raising your eyebrows at. But anyway, if you want to look at it,
yeah, I will.
when I contact Joanne, I can ask her if she would like to offer a comment on the Gilmontague 5-year projections, like whether she feels that they.
Well, let's just do the transportation with her first. Because if
Okay.
you ask her for comments on the 5-year projection, then you have to ask Tanya for that. Also,
Well, I was just going to do that for me personally.
oh, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
thought you
not
meant
sure-
in the meeting.
And no, and not in that meeting, but just say if there's something you would like to offer and hope that maybe I could get an email back from her.
Yeah, I might see about the potential. I'll see how I feel about
And I think
talking
we
to
already know
John
that.
about that.
Okay, that sounds, I think it'd be good to try to include John
Yeah.
and or Tanya. I think we already know that Tanya has some reservations, and the question is, can we get a succinct summary of those? How best.
You know,
to
what
do
you
it.
might want to do, Mike, you might want to ask Joanne how she feels about having Tanya at this point in time. Is she comfortable giving us or giving you, an update and fully understanding it and going over it? If she's comfortable with Tanya being a part of that at this point juncture, then that's fine. If she's not, then you might want to just have you and them. The other thing that you can do if you're looking for something to do in between is read the report and just from your perspective, jot down what you have as your takeaways from it. What are the positive takeaways from it? What are the ones that, have you step back and pause? So just sort of individually come up with your ideas of what you personally have as your takeaways from that so that you can share. So that was supposed to be one of the first steps, in this process, and then have a conversation about your various takeaways and see how people agree or disagree in terms of your reaction to the report itself. And so that will certainly take you into January, just doing that, and then share your lists when you get together
So your
after
your
transportation.
recommendation if for our New Year's Eve celebration is that we read the report and make comments on it.
Yes.
Well, I don't know about comments, but your takeaways. Yeah, I guess your
well, that's
celebration
comments.
is. But
Uh,
have a glass of wine while you're doing it, Jane.
Oh, okay.
Let's get the
Or
final,
two or three.
but let's get the final report so that we can make sure that we're.
Yes. So Alan, you're going
Yeah,
to contact.
I made a
Greg?
call. I already did. When we were on the phone, I called Greg and left him a message and said, can you email the report to the respective members because they're having trouble getting it off the website. So let's just do that first. And so that's
Great.
my task. My other task is going to be to call Jay and find out how much money there is, when is it due? And if he knows, just so we have it as information, is that something that has to be applied for to his knowledge by a district, or is it in the purview of us doing it? I think it's better to have the district or the towns do it, but it'd be good to just know, the parameters of who can apply for it.
Well,
And,
Alan,
and then,
we can't apply for it. We don't have a fiscal.
okay, so
Oh.
that takes care of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, thank you. So just get his take on that and then ask him about, just run by him, what's his thought, of successfully going after money if we wanted to hone in on the facilities themselves in terms of what might be needed, because they didn't do that. And maybe he has a recommendation because Mars has a lot of tentacles out there. Maybe he has some people, not with them, but he knows of some architects or whoever said the small town inspections that you can have come in and do those things, someone independent. Maybe he has some recommendations on who could do that.
No, and what I'm thinking of is something that is on the big building, how do you say, comparison to a home inspector. When you have
Yeah.
a home inspection, you have everything gone over. And what we need is somebody that has the expertise to do this for this big complex of buildings that we have. And that's going to take
Yeah.
a special expert.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
it's
I
an
agree.
architect.
And it's probably not an architect.
Okay, I got you. So I'll make sure I frame it that way. We're looking for really a comprehensive inspection of the building and all of its systems.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So, that's a pretty good plan to come, and you might want to throw out the idea of, well, I think that's enough.
I think you've got
That's a lot.
on your plate right now in terms of what we've talked about.
Alan, do you want me to send you some notes before the next meeting about what I think the takeaways from this meeting are? So you can look
No,
them
you don't
over
have
and
to.
see if I, okay.
Yeah, no, you don't have to. I mean, I'm sort of sitting in case you, had questions or, basically I just, I kind of wanted to be part of the think tank discussions of
You just don't have enough
what
to
you're
do,
thinking.
Alan.
And
Right. But
well,
if-
I'm glad I sat in because I learned some things today.
and, Mike, if you're so inclined and want to kind of do some encapsulation, especially since I've got to do minutes, I'd love your input on that. And
That's great.
then you'll somehow get to me the how do you say, the tape or the dialogue that I can.
Yes, I'll send you an email then.
Great. Okay.
If you sort of listed out the salient points of the conversation, bullet form, I mean, that's all that has to be really included in the minutes, the Finance Transportation Facilities Committee discussed, the following areas, and then you just sort of bullet them out. Now, you don't have to get into any detailed discussion about the outcomes. There were a few outcomes, and so you can put those as going forward, there seemed to be consensus around X, Y, and Z.
I think my understanding is that the minutes are supposed to give someone who wasn't here a sense of what got discussed. And,
Exactly.
and how the discussion went, so that, I mean, it's kind of vague language, but,
No, I understand, and I've got some handwritten notes, but I think to
So-
have more flush it in would be good.
sure, okay.
You know, if you look
Not a
at how
problem.
minutes are supposed to be done, and I used to do the minutes for all the school committee meetings that I had because it was easier for me. And I did it as a model. They are not interested, and you shouldn't have he said, she said, you know, Jane said this, Lynn said this, you know, Mike countered with this. That should not be it at all. It should be about, here was the discussion, here's the salient points, here was the vote. That's it.
Right. I
You
think the
know,
key is the
and-
salient
and-
points. You can't just say we
Right.
talked about facilities. You've got to do a little
Right.
more than that.
Yeah.
Right,
I've read, the open
Right.
meeting law has, which we had to take training on periodically when I was on the finance committee, that they actually did update it a little bit over time, so.
Well, I must
But anyway,
admit,
I think we'll be okay.
okay, yeah, because in
Okay,
our
do I,
town,
anything
someone
else?
would do nothing on this committee, and, oh, she's fabulous. And she set it up, some of the things, gave me the outline, and really good.
Good.
and here it is. I printed it out, the open meeting law. This is the new latest and greatest, so.
All right.
I'm
So
gonna read
anybody
it.
have anything else?
No,
Okay, very
Do I hear a
good.
motion to adjourn?
I so moved.
Second,
Okay, roll call vote.
aye.
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 Aye. All right, thank you all.
Thank
See you
you.
next
Have a
week.
great
Thank you.
night. See you next week.
And yes, indeed. And I run to another meeting. I gotta do another Zoom. All right, see you later.